Scientists compare ancient Iranian DNA with South Asian DNA, the connection that shocked everyone imagine. You dig up a 5,000-year-old grave, and inside it, you find a human skeleton. The bones are so old that they start crumbling like sand the moment you touch them. But hidden inside these dead bones is a secret that could change the entirety of history. That secret is DNA. And when scientists compared this DNA with the DNA of modern South Asian people and with the DNA of ancient Iranian people, the result that came out shook the entire genetics and archaeology community around the world. This wasn't just a scientific discovery, it was a story that told us what kind of relationship existed between South Asia and Iran thousands of years ago. Did people really migrate from Iran to South Asia and establish civilization here? Or is this story much older and much more interesting than that? In today's video, we'll talk about the research that found a link between the Indus Valley civilization, ancient Iran, and modern South Asian people, a link that no one had imagined. Watch until the end of the video because many of the things we're going to tell you today might just change the way you think about where you actually come from. Let's begin. First, it's important to understand how ancient DNA studies are actually done and why it's so difficult, especially in hot and humid regions like South Asia. DNA is a fragile thing. When a person dies, the DNA present in their body gradually starts to degrade. In cold and dry places, like Siberia or parts of Europe, DNA can remain preserved for thousands of years. But in a hot and humid place like South Asia, DNA breaks down very quickly. This is exactly why extracting ancient DNA from South Asia has been such a huge challenge for scientists. One research team reported that they built more than 200 DNA libraries from 61 skeletons at Rakhigarhi, an Indus Valley civilization site in Haryana's Hisar district in India. But usable data could only be recovered from a single skeleton, just 31 760 genetic variants, which is a tiny fraction of the full human genome. Yet even this small amount of data told such a big story that it left the whole world stunned. This effort is proof of just how much struggle scientists had to go through to obtain this information. And when they finally succeeded, what they found was truly shocking. Now let's talk a bit about the Indus Valley civilization, also known as the Harappan civilization. This civilization flourished roughly 5,000 years ago between 3300 BC and 1300 BC in the northwestern part of South Asia. It was one of the oldest urban societies in the world, meaning it had planned cities, drainage systems, granaries, and a standardized system of weights and measures. Cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa are remnants of this civilization that still exists today in Pakistan, and Rakhigarhi in India is one of the largest sites of this civilization. But for centuries, it remained a mystery who these people were, where they came from, what their language was, and most importantly, what connection they have with the people of South Asia today. In 2019, a breakthrough happened when scientists managed to extract DNA from a skeleton found at Rakhigarhi. This skeleton belonged to a woman, and her mitochondrial haplogroup turned out to be U2B2, a genetic marker that today is found almost exclusively in South Asia and was completely absent among roughly 400 ancient Central Asian people whose full mitochondrial genomes were examined. This was the first time DNA data had been obtained from a person of the Indus Valley civilization. And what it revealed truly turned out to be a game changer. Now we come to the actual point for which you're watching this video. When scientists analyzed the DNA of this Rakhigarhi skeleton, given the scientific name I6113, they found that it was a mix of two major ancestral components. First, an ancestry similar to that of ancient Iranians. Second, an ancestry similar to Southeast Asian hunter-gatherers, especially the people of the Andaman Islands, which scientists call Ancient Ancestral South Indian, or AHG, Andamanese hunter-gatherer-related ancestry. So far, everything seemed straightforward, But the real twist was that when scientists looked more closely at this Iranian-related ancestry, they discovered that the Iranian ancestry of the Indus Valley people and the ancestry of the actual ancient Iranian farmers both came from the very same common ancestor. And that common ancestor had already split apart at least 12,000 years earlier. In other words, the people of the Indus Valley civilization did not directly migrate from Iran. Rather, their ancestors and the ancestors of ancient Iranian farmers were part of the same group 12,000 years ago, who later went their separate ways. One group headed toward Iran and began farming there, while the other group stayed in South Asia and independently developed farming in its own way. Why does this matter so much? Because previously, a common theory held that the concept of farming spread from the Middle East, called the Fertile Crescent, to Iran, and then from Iran to South Asia, and that in this process, Iranian farmers migrated toward South Asia and joined with the local people to build the Indus Valley civilization. But the new DNA evidence has completely overturned this theory. This is perhaps the most shocking part of this entire research. Scientists clearly stated in their study that the Iranian-related ancestry of the Indus Valley civilization came from a lineage of early Iranian farmers, herders, and hunter-gatherers. But this lineage split off at a time when their ancestors weren't even farmers yet. They were still hunter-gatherers. This means that the shared ancestry found between ancient Iranians and South Asians is not proof that Western Iranian farmers migrated to South Asia in large numbers. Rather, it means that the ancient people of the Iranian Plateau and the Indus Valley were separate hunter-gatherer groups who each began farming on their own, without any large-scale population movement from one toward the other. In simpler words, the idea of farming may have spread culturally through trade, contact, or exchange of ideas, but people didn't migrate in large numbers along with it. The people of South Asia developed their own farming in their own way, on their own land. You can imagine how important this is for South Asia's history. It proves that the Indus Valley civilization wasn't a borrowed or imported civilization that came from outside. Rather, it was an indigenous civilization that emerged on its own, with roots thousands of years old in the subcontinent's own soil. But the story doesn't end there. There's an interesting twist from Iran's side as well. Earlier research showed that at a famous archaeological site on the Iranian Plateau, Shari Sokhta, in eastern Iran, something strange was observed. This place was a large population center between roughly 3550 and 2900 BC and remained a center of civilization until 2300 BC. When scientists examined the DNA of the ancient people there, they found AHG-related ancestry, the same Andamanese hunter-gatherer-related ancestry seen in the Indus Valley civilization, present in the Iranian region as well. And this ancestry had reached Iran through an influx from South Asia, particularly from the Indus Valley. So it wasn't just that Iranian-related ancestry came into South Asia, South Asian-related ancestry also went toward Iran. This cultural and genetic contact was two-way. People, ideas, and genes were moving in both directions. This makes the whole story even more interesting. It means that in the ancient world, there was no wall between Iran and South Asia. These were two separate trading zones or cultural spheres that were connected with each other. People came and went, goods were exchanged, and in this process, genes were sometimes shared too. Now here's another big shocking point. Most people living in South Asia today, whether in North India or Pakistan, carry an ancestry component that comes from steppe pastoralists. These steppe pastoralists were nomadic people who lived across the vast Eurasian grasslands from Eastern Europe all the way to Mongolia. But when scientists examined the DNA of that 5,000-year-old Rakhigarhi skeleton, there was no trace of steppe ancestry in it at all. Absolutely zero. What does this tell us? It tells us that when the Indus Valley civilization was at its peak, there was no significant steppe population present in this region. This steppe-related DNA arrived in South Asia later through migrations that took place after the decline of the IVC. This finding connects directly to a very large and well-known debate, the question of Indo-European languages. For centuries, linguists and historians have debated how Sanskrit and its related languages arrived in South Asia. One view has been that these languages entered South Asia through people coming from the Central Asian steppe region. The DNA evidence appears to support this view because the arrival of steppe ancestry occurs in the period after the IVC, the same period during which Indo-European languages are believed to have spread across South Asia. Now let's talk a little about how modern South Asians came to be genetically. In 2009, a famous study, Reich et al., showed that the genetic makeup of most South Asians today is a mixture of two major sources. First is ANI, ancestral North Indian, related to Western Eurasian populations. Second is ASI, ancestral South Indian, indigenous to South Asia itself, tied to the local soil. Now, when we connect these two with the IVC findings, a very beautiful picture emerges. Scientists say that the people of the Indus Valley civilization, who were a mix of Iranian-related and AHG-related ancestry, are actually referred to as the Indus Periphery Cline, or IVC cline. And it is this cline that later mixed with different populations in different places to form today's ANI and ASI populations. This means the IVC people were not directly only the ancestors of North Indians, nor only of South Indians, rather they were a common base for both. After the decline of the IVC, as people migrated to different regions, some toward the north, some toward the south, they mixed with various other groups to form two new, distinct populations, one that is more similar to modern North Indians and one that is more similar to modern South Indians. Researchers estimate that roughly 2/3 to 3/4 of the ancestry of most South Asians today comes from this IVC-related population. This number alone shows how deeply this civilization has shaped the identity of South Asia today. Now let's turn to Iran, where another very interesting piece of research has emerged. Scientists studied the DNA of people from Iran's northern plateau, spanning from 4700 BC to 1300 CE, that is, from the Copper Age to the Sassanid Empire. They took 50 samples from 9 different archaeological sites in Iran, from which 23 metagenomes and 13 nuclear genomes were extracted. The most interesting aspect of this study was that a kind of genetic continuity persisted on the Iranian Plateau for roughly 3,000 years, meaning that throughout this long stretch of history, the people of this region remained fundamentally the same population genetically, despite everything changing around them. Silk Road trade, the rise and fall of various empires, and trade routes extending all the way to the Mediterranean. A new early Chalcolithic sample was also found that was even older than all other Chalcolithic samples, and it showed that this ancient individual carried mostly early Neolithic Iranian genetic ancestry, meaning the roots of the Iranian people really are very deep and very old. This research also confirmed that the AHG-related ancestry, that is, the one similar to South Asia, the Indus Valley, found on the Iranian Plateau, appears earliest at places like Shahri Sokhta, which was truly the closest point in eastern Iran to the IVC, confirming the ancient trade and cultural relationship between these two civilizations. Now here arises a very important question that might be on your mind too. If Iranian-related ancestry is found in the IVC people, does that mean the Indus Valley civilization was actually built by Iranian people? The answer is absolutely not. And this is the most essential point of this entire research to understand. As mentioned earlier, this Iranian-related ancestry does not mean that actual Iranian farmers came and settled in South Asia. Rather, it means that a very long time ago, 12,000 years ago, or even earlier, there was a hunter-gatherer population whose lineage split into two branches. One branch went toward Iran and became Iranian Neolithic farmers. The other branch stayed in South Asia and developed in its own way. So this Iranian ancestry exists in the DNA of the IVC people because they share a common, very ancient root, not because Iranian people migrated to South Asia and built the IVC. Understanding this distinction is very important because online, people often ignore this nuance and spread incorrect claims, sometimes saying the IVC was built by Iranian people, and sometimes saying the IVC has no connection to Iran at all. Neither of these statements is entirely correct. The truth lies between the two, a deep, ancient, shared ancestry from thousands of years ago, but no direct migration. Now let's talk a bit about why this whole body of research is so important. First reason, it challenges an old, outsider-driven theory about South Asia's history. For decades, it was thought that farming, civilization, and progress in South Asia came from outside, whether from Iran or Central Asia. But the new DNA evidence shows that South Asia's own people, on their own land, were laying the foundation of their own civilization. Second reason, it tells us that migration and cultural exchange are two different things, and they shouldn't be confused with one another. Just because people in two places have similar genes or similar culture doesn't necessarily mean a large population movement occurred there. Sometimes ideas and trade alone are enough to drive progress. Third reason, this research also gives a scientific foundation to the very old and sometimes politically charged debate over Indo-European languages. The absence of steppe ancestry in the IVC and its arrival in the later period is strong evidence that Indo-European languages likely reached South Asia only after the end of the IVC. Fourth reason, it shows us just how complex human history is. The people of a single region over many thousands of years mixed with people arriving from different places at different times, forming a new, unique genetic and cultural fabric. This is not a simple, straightforward story. It is a complex, layered one. Now, this topic sometimes becomes a bit sensitive too, because questions of origin and ancestry in South Asia often become part of political debate. Some people want to prove that South Asia's civilization was purely indigenous, with no outside influence at all. Some people want to show that South Asia's progress came from outside. DNA science here acts as a neutral, unbiased witness. It doesn't fully validate the purely indigenous theory, nor the outside origin theory. Instead, it presents a more nuanced picture that the people of South Asia emerged from a very ancient, local hunter-gatherer population who developed their own farming, but who over thousands of years remained connected with neighboring regions, Iran, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, through trade, culture, and sometimes intermarriage. This is a story that doesn't prove the purity or supremacy of any one nation or group. Rather, it shows that humanity has always been mixed, connected, and learning from one another. In today's era, ancient DNA research is advancing very rapidly. New technologies, such as the ability to sequence even very small quantities of DNA, are helping scientists extract data from places where it was previously impossible, such as South Asia's hot and humid environment. Because of this, in the coming years, we can expect even more ancient skeletons to yield DNA from Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and many other sites. Every new sample adds a new piece to this puzzle and improves our understanding further. It's also worth remembering that so far, only a handful of IVC skeletons have yielded usable DNA data. This means this research is still in its early stages. As new discoveries are made, our understanding may well continue to evolve. Many well-known scientists have shared their views on this discovery. Some have called it a key that unlocks a mystery, because the relationship of the IVC people with their contemporaries and with later populations has always been a puzzle. Other researchers have said that after the decline of the Indus Valley, Several migrations took place in South Asia that formed two distinct populations, one closer to modern North Indians and another closer to modern South Indians. And these two populations, along with several other smaller groups, make up the ancestry of most South Asians today. All of this helps us understand why a place as diverse and densely populated as South Asia carries so much genetic and cultural diversity, because its roots themselves are thousands of years old, layered across many strata. Now you might be thinking this all sounds very academic and distant. What does it have to do with our everyday lives? Friends, it actually has a very deep connection. When we think about our identity, whether national, regional, or cultural, we often assume that our roots are simple and straightforward, coming from just one place. But science always shows that the reality is far more complex and far more beautiful than that. You, I, and millions of people across South Asia, all of us carry within us a mix of populations from thousands of years ago. Part of it comes from people who were developing farming on this very land thousands of years ago. Part of it comes from people who arrived from Central Asia. Part of it comes from ancient hunter-gatherers who have lived in this region since after the Ice Age. So the next time someone says, "We are purely people of one place, one race," remember that DNA science tells a very different story, one that is mixed, diverse, and incredibly rich. So, friends, what do we learn from all this research? First, the Indus Valley civilization was not an imported civilization. It emerged on South Asia's own soil by the hands of its own people in its own way. Second, the genetic similarity found between ancient Iranians and South Asians is not the result of direct migrations, but comes from a very ancient shared ancestor, more than 12,000 years old. Third, there was two-way contact between South Asia and Iran even in ancient times, trade, culture, and sometimes an exchange of genes as well. Fourth, the genetic identity of South Asians today is an excellent mix of IVC-related ancestry, steppe-related ancestry, and several other smaller groups formed over thousands of years. And perhaps the biggest lesson is that history of any region is never simple and straightforward. It is always a collection of many stories, many people, and many journeys. And the more we understand these stories through science, the more we realize that humanity has always been connected to one another, no matter how many thousands of kilometers apart. So, friends, that was the complete story of the shocking connection between ancient Iranian DNA and South Asian DNA, which stunned the entire scientific world. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it with your friends. And if you want to hear more interesting stories like this about history and science, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you get notified as soon as our next video is out. Do let us know in the comments which part of this video you found most interesting. Was it the steppe ancestry point or the 12,000-year-old common ancestor? See you in the next video with another interesting story. Until then, Allah Hafiz.